All right, welcome to House Hacking Success. Today we're going to talk about the COVID-19 crisis and how it's affecting real estate. Brad, what do you think this means to real estate investors right now?
Well, it really depends on where you're at right now. All over the country is getting affected a little bit differently by this. Here in the state of Michigan, our governor just suspended our ability to evict a tenant based on non-payments. And so, that's until further notice. So we don't really have a timeline. The big three car manufacturers here in the state of Michigan have shut down. Bars and restaurants have shut down, right? So a lot of people are out of jobs and on unemployment here in the state of Michigan. Of course, California is on lockdown. So is Illinois. So is New York, and probably other states here soon. So it really depends on where you're at, but and it's affecting us differently. But I think overall, you can take a silver lining and see the positives from this because we're coming off of maybe a seller's market and into kind of a mid-level where it's still a thriving real estate market, but we have fewer buyers out there right now, which means that you can get advantageous terms for yourself in deals. And
Sure.
I'm doing it with many clients right now. Getting cash deals accepted for well below listing prices. We're getting concessions that were unlikely just 3 weeks ago. We're able to get concessions on deals for house hackers, which is something that we've talked a little bit about on the show, but it's incredibly advantageous if you don't have to pay closing costs. And I think the thing that most people, especially newbies, don't maybe realize with closing costs is 2/3 of what you're paying in closing costs, which kind of vary, but generally between 3 and 4% of the purchase price is what your closing cost is going to be, not your down payment. That is generally taxes and insurance, right? And so that's why there's a big gap. What are your taxes? What kind of tax bracket are you in? As far as like where this place is the variable. But eliminating that 3 or 4% by having the seller pay for it is very advantageous.
Absolutely. I think it's real surprising how fast it went from a seller's market to a buyer's market. Would you suggest people that are looking to buy right now that they should have an amount of reserves in the bank, just because the future is unpredictable and we may not know how fast they may be able to get tenants into that property if they decide to house hack?
Absolutely. I mean, you should always have some sort of reserves. Um,
Mhm.
but there are a lot of unique variables out there right now, right? For instance, Congress just passed the fact that any Freddie and Fannie backed mortgage has the ability to delay payments for up to 12 months, right? We don't really know all the variables yet, like who qualifies for something like that, but we know that there is going to be some government intervention allowing people to delay and defer payments if need be, right? We know that, of course, like I said, we're not going to be able to evict people based on lack of payment here in the state of Michigan, and I'm sure many other states are going to follow suit with that, and it might even become a federal mandate. And so there are a lot of variables in this time, and it is still technically a seller's market. I mean, the real estate market hasn't slowed down that much yet, but we have the ability now to maybe create doubt and create possibilities to structure deals in a way that are very advantageous for the buyers. So I would say, as far as reserves, um, yes, you need reserves, but if you can if you have the money to put down for both the down payment and the seller concessions, and you make the buyer pay for your seller concessions, right? The closing costs, the 3 to 4% that we talked about,
Mhm.
that right there can become your reserve, right? And it's going to take you 40 plus days to make your first payment. It all depends on when you close, but you're not going to have an immediate payment on the property, right? And then if this gets elongated, we're going to have some programs that'll help out, right? But it's going to take you 30 days usually to close if you're using traditional financing. It's going to take you an additional 40 days from that to actually have your first payment. Right now we're 70 days out, and hopefully in 70 days from now, um, the world will be a little bit different than it is right now, and hopefully we'll have some solutions to the problem. Hopefully, we'll begin to start work back up like China has. All the Apple stores in China are back in business. It's not necessarily that China has cleared all the smoke, but there's at least a light at the end of the tunnel, maybe. And hopefully we have something similar to that in 70 days out. So I would say this is a very good time to buy, because people ask me, well, should I wait for the recession? And that's not, as if somebody's in position to do that, fantastic. But the problem is, especially for new borrowers, when and if the market absolutely tanks, okay, everything's going to get restricted, and lending is going to freeze like it did in 2008. Okay, and so all of these loose FHA, restrictions now, and ability to borrow, it's all going to go away, right? I have a borrower right now that's only had a job just got out of college. He's only had a job for less than 3 months, right? And is able to qualify for, pretty substantial amount of money with college, debt still. And so that won't happen during a recession. They won't be able to lend to borrowers like that, at-risk borrowers like that. So there's a lot of pros to being in the market, being vigilant, right? And obviously taking it step by step. But I think it is a good, during chaos is always opportunity, and I think that's what this presents.
Sure. I mean, we're definitely seeing a slowdown in the market right now too, but we have no idea what the future holds. We have no clue if this is going to kick off a long-term recession or if the market's just going to go back churning as usual and just pick up on the pace that it left off at. So, on the note of just waiting for the housing market to crash, there is a potential problem with that. Where if you're here and you're waiting for a crash, it could go up all the way to here over the next 5 or so years. And when it does crash, it'll never get back down to where you started waiting. So that's why, like, is it Warren Buffett who says time in the market is better than timing the market? And that's why, because the market's so unpredictable and we can't really time it that well. But with all that being said, it's my understanding that you had one of the best weeks as a real estate agent so far, despite all this.
Yeah, I work with a lot of investors, right? And so um, when there's tumultuous times, it presents opportunities. So yeah, I mean, we've had a great week, and there are a lot of people that see a lot of opportunity. And again, like I tell, people ask me all the time, are we going into recession? And honestly, I mean, I study this all day, and I have no idea. This is obviously uncharted territory. We have unprecedented action by government to, I mean, the amount of stimulus that we have put out already, and the fact that we're suspending mortgage payments, we're suspending the ability to evict, right? This hasn't happened at this magnitude. So I don't know, but what I do know is that it really doesn't matter it doesn't matter what the property value is as a house hacker, right? If you buy in areas that are going to appreciate over time, and over time means 10, 20, 30 years, what the market is doing right now is not that important. Probably a greater, in my opinion, a greater perspective to take is if you're a house hacker and you live for free for 10 years, it'll far outweigh whatever the market does momentarily. And the fact that you can get into a house for 3.5% down with FHA, potentially 0% down with some other government-backed loans, um, you know, that is unprecedented. That didn't happen 20 years ago. You have the ability to literally eliminate your housing expense. And you have the ability to do it on your terms now, right? You can get better deals. You can, put things into contracts that favor you long term. You can get the seller potentially to pay for concessions, which might have been a little bit more difficult, 2, 3 weeks ago. Banks, on repo houses are coming down substantially to offload books. I think this is still a very good time to be a buyer. And I think for the most part, as a nation, we will get through this only because there's a lot of political saving face going on right now, right? And they're willing to do whatever it takes to right this ship for better or for worse. And so I think long term, yes, immediately in the short term, it's going to be difficult, potentially get renters in there, mostly because it's going to be difficult just to show the property, right? Just with everything going on, that's going to
Right.
present a challenge. Um, but I do think it's a good time. I think it's almost always a good time to be a house hacker. And again, like you said, time in the market is better than timing the market. And taking opportunities of situations like this is important because, again, the only thing to ever really substantially take down the housing market was 2008. And this isn't a mortgage situation. I think we're in a lot better position as a country than we were in 2008 from a housing perspective. And the fact that they're delaying and not allowing homeowners to default, right, means that we're not going to have the kind of flooding the market by repo, by houses that go into foreclosure like we did in 2008. That's what took the housing market down. On top of the mortgage, situation. But all the flooding in the market of the foreclosures drove down everything else, the prices of the market. We probably won't see that because the government is convinced that they're not going to allow that to happen. So, for better or for worse, I don't think this is going to substantially. Let me rephrase. As long as this isn't a 6 month or 12-month issue where we're literally halting the economy for that long, I don't think this is going to dramatically affect the housing market like some people tend to think it will.
Yep, and besides the housing market, it's affecting people's lives too. People are going on unemployment, not being able to work, things of that nature. And if you're already house hacking, and this happens, you're at an advantage because you've been saving on your living costs for however long that you've been house hacking. So that means you probably have savings, reserves, rent coming in from the people that you're house hacking, from your tenants at your house hack. All these things are going to help you weather the storm of tough times.
Yeah, and another thing, right now I'm monitoring to see if these Freddie and Fannie backed mortgages are going to extend to landlords. And there's some gray area whether that will or won't happen. So one thing that will comfort house hackers is the fact that right now these mainly apply to owner occupied properties, right? And so as a house hacker, of course, if we're living in the property, it's an owner occupied property.
Mhm.
And so even if, right, our renters aren't paying rent because they lose their job, um, you know, we have the ability to delay a mortgage payment, right? Even if, and we're going to get some sort of government relief to people for payments, right? It looks like maybe $1,000 checks. I've heard as much as maybe 2 or 2,500. There's still some figuring out to do, with all of that, with government intervention in that way. But so we will eventually get rent checks, but we have the ability to delay as house hackers, right? Where people, as landlords, might not get granted that kind of extension, which is going to make it a little more challenging. So there's a lot of advantages to being a house hacker because the government treats you as a very essential part of the economy. Home ownership is the epitome of growing the economy, as well as the stock market. But the government obviously thinks housing is more important, potentially. So there's a lot of benefits to being a house hacker. And that's why I think it's still a good time to be a buyer. I don't think this is going to be some dramatic 2008 in the housing market. Now, I mean, in the stock market, we're already seeing it. All the gains of this administration, got wiped out in a matter of 10 days, right, in the stock market. So, but I think the real estate market is going to, recover. I think it's not going to go into some huge recession in the real estate market like it did in 2008, and I think it'll weather it overall.
Yeah, so if you're in the position to buy now, might be a great time for you to purchase property. Start house
Absolutely.
hacking, right?
Absolutely.
Yep.
So yeah, we wanted to bring this to you guys because obviously this is an important time in our life. Not everyone is going to be able to continue to grow, right? Some states are already on lockdown, right? Which means that, getting out is going to be challenging. Um, the state of Michigan we did present, to the state of Michigan, attempting to allow real estate to be a critical, uh, meaning that real estate agents can continue to show houses, a critical part of the economy,
Yeah, essential
just like other
business, right?
jobs. Yeah. And so I think a lot of other states are going to follow suit. So I think we are still going to be able to show properties. It's going to present a lot of challenges. There's going to be a lot of virtual touring and showing and things of that nature. But if you're in the position and if you've been preparing, I think this is as good as ever of a time to get in the market, find good properties. People are going to be, landlords who are on a pinch with other jobs. I got a call from a landlord this week who owns, retail. He's got retail shops, and he said, "Hey, listen, I want to offload this property. Um, do you want it, or do you know somebody that wants it?" And the property is substantially, less than maybe market value right now. And he's like, listen, if you want it, we'll cut all the commissions out, and you just purchase it at this, or if whatever. I think there's going to be a little bit of that. There's going to be people that are strapped for cash that need, business owners, people that own restaurants, people that own bars, whatever. A lot of these people also own rental properties. They might need to offload one. It might be a very good time for you to get into the market. So, which these are the kind of people that are going to be owning the duplexes in town, right?
Mhm.
So contacting them and say, hey, listen, like if you're looking to buy or sell, I'm ready to go. There's a lot of opportunity out there, I believe. Yeah. So again, we just wanted to present this to you. I think it's unprecedented time, but there's a lot of comfort and peace, I think, for Drew and I and other house hackers, knowing that our mortgage is going to get covered one way or the other. Our we've been saving. It's allowed us to build up reserves. It's allowed us to feel comfortable. My wife and I aren't. I mean, I'm laid off from my main job. Of course, I still sell real estate and stuff, but we aren't panicking. We've been preparing for situations like this, not this particularly, but we've just been preparing in general. So I think house hacking allows you to do that and allows you to have a lot of peace of mind and not need to freak out like a lot of business owners are right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I mean, I'm in the same position. My day job, I'm potentially going to be laid off. So I'm expecting that, preparing for impact. But because of house hacking and the position that I've been in, I feel pretty comfortable where I'm at.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if you guys have questions, DM us, email us. We would like to answer all your questions. But in general, I think a lot of people around the country are going to find this time to be a very advantageous time to get in. A lot of people are going to be a lot of sellers are going to be a little bit more apt to sell, to get out from underneath these properties and have some cash on hand, and you can be that solution to the problem. Um, and so absolutely.